Barbara made reference to the portraits here, and could I draw your attention to the portrait of Daniel O'Connell, which is in the centre there. And he was Lord Mayor of Dublin in 1841, and he's wearing King Billy's chain, which, as the Lord Mayor said earlier, is still worn today. But O'Connell brokered what was the first power-sharing agreement on the island of Ireland. And the Nationalists were in the ascendancy in Dublin City Council. They had a majority, which meant that they could continue having Catholic Nationalists Lord Mayors of Dublin for decades to come. But O'Connell decided to reach out to the people who had been displaced by the Catholics, the Unionists, and he offered them every second year that they would have a Lord Mayor of Dublin. And this was called the Mayoralty Compact, and it lasted until 1880, when Charles Stewart Parnell had other ideas. So really, O'Connell, as you know, was always a force for peace, and it's appropriate that we're here in his chamber just discussing peace this afternoon. Now, we've very few ground rules for the discussion this afternoon, but could I ask you just to say the name of the person that you're addressing your question to? That'd be great. Those of you who are near the microphones, please use them. You just pull the microphone down close to you, and there's a white button, and you press the white button, and the microphone comes on. So that's about it, really. So do we have anyone who would like to make any comments or ask any questions? Yes, please. You sir. Yep.
My name is Michael Grant, and I'm a member of the Western Front Association. I've been for years, and I've been involved in commemorating both sides for more years than I care to remember. But what I want to talk to you about is my son. My son is director of the Irish College in Louvain in Belgium. And they are at the moment heavily involved in a program called My Adopted Soldier. And that's a program where 15 students from the island of Ireland are given a soldier to adopt. They go and they research that soldier, find out as much information as they can, and the last weekend in June, they're going to Belgium, where they will find that either the final resting place of that soldier or where that soldier is commemorated. This is the second year that this has happened. But this year is different, because this year they will team up with 15 German students from Frankfurt, and they will all stay in the college in Leuven and exchange ideas, exchange research, and they will go with each other and commemorate each adopted soldier. And I think that's a fantastic way of remembering. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And is there somebody else there who wanted to say something? Ah, yes, of course. Thanks, Frank.
Just to explain, the reason I moved across the room is that the windows are open and there's an awful lot of outside noise. My name is Frank Connolly, and I was involved with Comora 98 and Emmet 200 commemorating the bicentenaries of 1798 and 1803. And within that broad group, which included nearly everybody, every political group and faction and so on, there were a few of us who thought that because the great contribution that the Protestant people of especially the 18th century had made, and as we all know, the vast majority of the leaders of the United Irishmen, it was founded in Belfast, Wolfe Tone and McCracken and all the rest of them. So we thought we might be able to do something that would get unions to come south in a neutral venue. So when Oldbridge, the Battle of the Boyne site, was acquired and all that, we invited people. We actually, invited somebody from the Unionist Society in the north and the National in the south to come and speak on the 1st of July, because the Battle of the Boyne was fought on the 1st of July under the old Julian calendar. Sorry, I'll have to go. And The first year we had John Grave, the Hall Library in Belfast, and Seamus Cullen, who was an historian who wrote the book The Emmet Rising in Kildare, and he was involved with the Schleena War and a whole lot of other historical things. And yeah, we did it for a few years, and we had the support of the Old Drogheda Society, and the late T.K. Whittaker gave us a lot of support. But the last year we had Albert Reynolds, the late Albert Reynolds, former Taoiseach, and Dawn Purvis of the PUP. Now, in the process of doing all that, I wrote to, let's say, Lord Mount Charles in Slane, to Lady Herman, you know, the MP, she's now an independent MP, she was Ulster Unionist and so on, and every one of them were quite supportive of it. Now, because actually of the group who were involved, believe it or not, I was one of the youngest. So naturally there's I'm about nearly left on my own at this stage, but I think that if it was officially organised, I mentioned this now to two of our speakers, if it could be organised that an event more or less like ours, but extended to what we have here today, and have it in Oldbridge on the 1st of July, which was actually in the 19th and early 20th century, was commemorated by the Independent Orange Order. And that this would give a good reason for Orangemen to come south and see, as Albert Reynolds said, we don't have two heads on us down here. And we got support right across the board, except from the media. We couldn't get any media interested. We got a bit of support from the Tuam Herald, which was way over in the west of Ireland, and some other publication up in the north, but none of the Dublin media were interested because, as to use the common cliche, it wasn't sexy. There was no conflict, and there was no. It would be just something like this expanded. But I think that it could be developed into something where the Orangemen could have two celebrations during the month of July in the Republic in Oldbridge, the Battle of the Boyne-site, on the 1st of July, and their normal one on the 12th, north of the border, and of course they have it in Donegal and so on, and we know their bodies in Wicklow and so on. So that I've been going to the north of Ireland now since the 1960s, and the ignorance in the north of Ireland of the south generally, and the ignorance in the south of the north. I mean, there are people in both communities who know more about American politics and how the American system works than the people. Okay, we've learned a lot now through all the discussion over the last 20 years or whatever. But I mean, there was this blind ignorance by both sides of the other side. And I think it's incumbent on us here in this state to reach out to the Unionists in the north and say, we consider you Irish as well. This site that the 50 or 60 million was spent mainly to accommodate you and your views, and you can come down here and celebrate, and there's quite a lot of room there, and there could.
That's excellent, Frank. That really is. That's a great idea.
So I'm just throwing that out to all the people on the panel.
Grand, thank you. Would anyone like to comment on that? Well, if that's the case, then I'll ask for a question. Perhaps, is there a question from the floor? Yes, over here.
Okay. Yeah, just a question, not to anyone in particular, but given the theme of the seminar today, does the panel have any view on what Brexit is likely to do to the peace process?
I'll start. Others may disagree. I think Brexit will make life very, very difficult. And I think we had a settlement in 1998, and I think while maybe very few people were prepared to give it 100% endorsement. In other words, everybody at the reservations, people got bits and had to give away bits of their hopes and their aspirations. Nevertheless, it was a relatively good settlement all round. My worry is that Brexit destabilises the thing entirely, and my worry is, quite frankly, and Chris may have a different view on this, but I think what worries me is that the British net contribution of $7.5 billion to Europe is much less than the British contribution to a block grant for Northern Ireland. And what I'm hearing with some of the right-wing Conservatives is that they would nearly be glad to be rid of us at times. Now, that may not be the majority, but that's a theme that emerges from time to time from some of the Conservatives, and it worries me. And it worries me that if this government gets it tight economically on the back of Brexit, that they may decide to abandon Northern Ireland, if not in one outright sweep, by degrees. And I cannot speak, and I'm not even going to attempt to speak, for the Protestant Unionist Loyalist population, but I am worried about that population. That population feels abandoned and left behind at times, and it's no disrespect or no fault. Chris laboured long and hard as a councillor and as a colleague of mine to serve that community, but I'm very concerned because education and employment opportunities and all the things that people expect from life are not there. And if you mix up economic deprivation with political frustration, you end up in a very difficult space. But the difficulty about Brexit is nobody knows what it's going to mean down the road, but everybody feels fairly threatened by it. So that's my tuppence worth.
Thank you for that. Yes, please.
Yeah. I don't see it just in as dark terms as Alistair. I actually started out at the commencement of the Brexit debate being a Remainer, and eventually changed my position to leave. What I think will happen is, well, first of all, we're debating hard borders and soft borders and this and that and the other. And of course, the process has only started. The time for these debates in a couple of years' time, when we see. I suspect there will be bilateral agreements between the United Kingdom and other states, and that when Brexit will come, I think 5 years from now we'll hardly notice. That's my personal view, and I could be wrong. I cannot see the governments altering significantly the relationships, the trading relationships between the UK and the rest of Europe. 60% of all German cars are exported to the UK. Merkel's not going to say, those damn British, they pulled out of the European Union, we're not going to export any more cars to them, because I mean, their economy couldn't stand it. I think things will simply ameliorate and they will move on. I'm concerned about what Alistair says, and I don't doubt his word for a second, about whether or not this will become contagious in the British Exchequer. But 9.4 billion, I think, we get out of per annum. It's for a man, woman and 2 children. It's on average you get from the British Exchequer in Northern Ireland, for a man, a wife and 2 kids, 24,000 a year. Now, the Exchequer might feel that it can't sustain that, but I wouldn't be convinced. But I think we've got to just simply keep moving ahead. And can I just say something else? Seeing the day that's in it and seeing where we are, I don't see any change to the common travel policy, to the single travel area. I think these things will be resolved too. I don't see the soldiers back on the border stopping to check whether people have got half a pound of sausages in their bag or stuff. All of that stuff is scaremongering, and I don't think it's really going to make a difference. But we'll have to look carefully at what the 2 states do in Dublin and in Westminster over the next couple of years. But I think it'll all just peter out. Maybe, and I'm not known for optimism, but I mean, I must say that's my view.
Well, our speakers are all extremely busy people, so we have time for just one more question if anyone has that. No? Yes?
Yeah, about the Dublin Fusiliers, okay? Because when I first came to Ireland, I'm from Yorkshire, although I'm now Irish, okay? But just sort of this thing of wearing a poppy, did we wear a poppy? It was a bit difficult, you know, I'm Church of Ireland and this kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, because of this great get-together of people, you know, we can remember World War I, right? And I think, and remember it. And I think this brought a whole lot to bring together the different parts of Ireland, if I may say so. So I just want to just make that general point. And I remember you were at one of the first meetings. I do remember that. Okay.
Thank you very much. That's great. Yes, one comment. Thank you.
I would like to comment really on, I'm a military historian and a member of the Dublin Fusiliers Association and an ex-serviceman here in Ireland. But I would like to make a quick comment on the battle itself and the people that took part in it as such. The battle, of course, was led by Plummer. Plummer was a very experienced general, and he had Hague in his staff. He had taught Hague in Staff College, right? So he was senior in service to Hague, right? He was meticulous in his planning for the whole battle, and tunnelling was almost complete a year before the battle started. He was very concerned for the safety of his men, and as you know, it was one of the most successful battles fought in World War I. As well as that too, of course, he served in Ireland. He was the General Officer commanding in the Curragh, and his wife, of course, and himself enjoyed going racing in the Phoenix Park. He also, if you go to the Curragh Golf Club, you'll see that he's mentioned on the board there as the president of the Curragh. Well, he was General Officer commanding at the Curragh. Of course, on the other hand, when you remember the Irish regiments, we probably remember the Dublin Fusiliers and the Royal Irish and the Leinsters and the Connachts and the Enniskillens. Yeah, perhaps we shouldn't forget really the regiment or the battalion that was detonated when they were either advanced too quickly or a mine was late detonating, and they were the Royal Irish Rifles. And they advanced anyhow, and there was 50 of them is buried on Lone Tree Cemetery on the side of Messines Hill. Now, the one thing to remember about, perhaps that's the regiment that really probably represents us all, really, because really the enlistment area of the rifles was cross-border. You know, of course, on the other hand, it wasn't. With the disbandment of the old regiments, it wasn't disbanded, it became the Royal Ulster Rifles. So we really should have, and besides, in probably the most, since there weren't very many casualties in the rest of the battalions, the rifles really took a hit. So really, we should probably remember them as much as we remember them all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harte spoke first.
Oh, I beg your pardon. No. I was just going to say, I wasn't aware of that. That's interesting. And she say about the cross-community nature of the rifles. I'm currently researching into the Dublin Orange men who fought in the First World War. They would tend to have been working-class dubs, and like most working-class dubs, they almost inevitably they ended up in the Royal Dublin Fusiliers. They didn't say, oh, we're from a Protestant side, we're Dubliners, we're going to head up the Enniskillen, or we're going to head up the here, there, everywhere. They joined their local regiment. Quite a lot quite a large, I suspect, Protestant membership of the Royal Dublin Fusiliers.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak?
I just wanted to make one point, not directly relevant to it, but one of the issues that I was involved with over the years, and I know that Dublin Fusiliers and a lot of the other groups were interested in our flags of the regiments that are still across the water. We had almost reached a point 15 years ago where they'd be returned to their rightful place, and it was always explained to me that as soon as we had a state visit 2 ways by the Queen and by the President, that should remove the final difficulty. And I chased her through the system for many years, and I was told that the only person who can release these is the good lady herself. And I still think, you know, it should be followed through. The years have moved on now, and you know, it would mean, I was just looking, it reminded me when I saw your excellent museum downstairs. But I think, in respect to all of the people north and south that were involved, because those flags, I'm sure they're well respected across the water, but it would help here if they were back. And I don't think that campaign should be given up. And I was rattling it on for years, and I finally got to the civil servant whose name is really relevant, and he told me, listen, you're going to have to convince Her Majesty. And I still think it should be followed. I don't think she's a hang up about it, but I think if it's not chased and followed through, they won't come back. And it'd be just lovely to have them back. They're in good condition. I've seen them. They're there, and you know, it would be good respect to kind of people you're talking about it. And if it was symbolism, I'm not huge into symbolism because it gets mixed up and all kind of other arguments. But if we were to follow the line of symbolism, I think that would be number one.
That's a great idea. Yeah, it certainly is. Yes, can we take one more question?
Mary, when the question about Brexit and the impact on the peace process, I'd like to hear Bertie Ahern's comments on that. You've heard the two contrasting interpretations, Chris and Alistair. Where do you stand between those two?
Well, I'll give you the middle of the road one, but anyway, I'll tell you, like, both people are right, because Chris is saying, listen, we don't know because the negotiations are just starting, and Alistair has given the view what he thinks might happen. But I'll tell you what I believe is important. Like, everybody is saying, there's almost a consensus. They don't want to do anything to disrespect the Good Friday Belfast Agreement. They don't want to do anything that disrespects any of the issues that have happened over the last 20 years or prior to that. And then people say, well, we don't know how we'll work it all out. My view is this, that if the British government and the European Union take one simple decision to respect the integrity of the Good Friday Agreement as an international UN-lodged agreement, then they must find a resolution to the one area of difficulty. I agree with Chris that I think the free movement of either tourists or people crossing the border every day will not matter. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for the movement of goods. It has been made quite clear at European Union level and by the WTO that if the border between the European Union and the United Kingdom happens to be our invisible border, therefore you have to have customs. It's not Bertie Ahern's in this, it is those that do it. So we have to find a way around that. Now, I think there is a way around that. I don't think we've got to that stage yet. I don't think we've got to the negotiations. But my belief is that the British government will have to concede a number of things, and Europe will have to concede a number of things. All that stuff about the payment of 100 billion and 200 billion, doesn't matter what it is, somebody will work it out someday. That doesn't worry me. But on the free trade, they have to get an agreement. If we're to keep the integrity of the Good Friday Agreement, that there's free movement of goods. And the way of doing that is the European Free Trade Agreement, which is a separate agreement there since 1960. And if that came into play, the UK hold the sovereignty of the United Kingdom, and the European Trade Agreement can make an allowance for how you do it. And the other big issue that the Conservatives, and I accept the Conservatives' argument, the Leavers won the referendum. I don't get into any of those arguments. But they hold the view that they must hold their sovereignty, they must hold their position. I think the free trade agreement can do that. And if you work around the free trade agreement, you can find resolutions to European Court of Justice, because many eminent experts, I'm not legally, have said that you could have a situation where the London courts could arbitrate over the European Free Trade Agreement. They can't over the present position. And I think with a bit of imagination, a bit of ingenuity, they can do that. To stick it as it presently is, and listen, there's no negotiations yet, so we all know how things move on, but to put customs back on the border here would be a grave mistake. And I don't think the British government want to do it. I don't think the unionist community in the north don't want to do it. We know what the nationalist community want. I don't think the Irish government want to do it. So we have to find a bit of a good agreement. And I think the solution lies in the European Free Trade Agreement, which is well tried, well tested, works in other countries, has been amended for Liechtenstein, for Norway and for other places, and I believe it can be amended to do this, and I think it should be. That's my view.
So I think we will have to leave it at that now, because our speakers have to head off. But as a grand finale to our afternoon, we are going to have a reading of the Messines Park Peace Pledge. And this will be read by Paddy Harte Jr., whose late father set up the park. And he is a member of the board of the International Fund for Ireland, which was established under the Anglo-Irish Agreement in 1986 to promote peace and reconciliation between both traditions on both parts of the island of Ireland. And this international fund has invested 800 million euros since its inception. So,
thank you, Speaker. It's a great honour for me to be asked to deliver this pledge. I spent yesterday morning on the peace walls in Belfast, and I can tell you that this pledge is as relevant now as it was in 1998. And I would like to thank Tom for keeping the central theme of reconciliation in the peace tour. So with that, I'll do my best to deliver the pledge. From the crest of this ridge, which was a scene of terrific courage in the First World War, on which we have built a peace park and round tower to commemorate thousands of young men from all parts of Ireland who fought a common enemy, defended democracy and the rights of nations, whose graves are in shockingly uncountable numbers, and those who have no graves. We condemn war and the futility of war. We repudiate and denounce violence, aggression, intimidation, threats and unfriendly behaviour. As Protestants and Catholics, we apologise for the terrible deeds we have done to each other and ask forgiveness. From this sacred shrine of remembrance, where soldiers of all nationalities, creeds and political allegiances were united in death, we appeal to all people in Ireland to help build a peaceful and tolerant society. Let us remember the solidarity and trust that developed between Protestant and Catholic soldiers when they served together in these trenches. As we jointly thank the armistice of 11th of November 1918, when the guns fell silent along the Western Front, we affirm that a fitting tribute to the principles for which men and women from the island of Ireland died in both wars would be a permanent peace.
So that concludes our seminar, and on your behalf, I'd like to thank our four speakers very warmly for their contributions: Bertie Ahern, Barbara Walsh, Kristen Jimpsey, and Alistair MacDonald, and also Tom Burke for bringing all that together. Thank you.